because of hurdles to do with our local environment, our context, the challenges that we face that are local. When this solution came out, the focus has mainly been on the first world countries. Uh, Things to do with cloud, uh, things to do with cloud access. In the Western world, almost all these institutions rely on the cloud because the cloud is best there with them. Yet here we have issues of data sovereignty. Bank of Uganda just released regulations on cloud adoption by all the institutions under them that are regulated by them. And they were advocating for local clouds. Those are the ones in the country, and urging that all important information should not be exported. Now, you look at such an issue, it would have an effect on the adoption of zero trust network access. We look at the core banking systems employed, uh, the requirements by ZTNA is that these solutions should have uh, things like two-factor authentication, should have robust identity and access management. These are things that most banks here do not have by virtue of the technology that they employ. Most of this technology, they've had it for over 20 years. These are old technologies. So those need to be looked at if we are to implement zero trust network access well, without introducing new risks and wasting resources on adopting technologies poorly. So the solution that this study proposes is a context-aware risk assessment framework tailored for Uganda's financial sector. Here we are looking at bridging. Here we are looking at bridging the gap between the theoretical zero trust security models and the the practical realities that we have on the ground. So we get to the background of the study. So Uganda's digital financial footprint is really, really big, and it keeps growing every other period. Consider it either month, half year, or even per annum, according to the reports. Mobile money transactions alone exceeded $70 billion in 2024. So we know that where there's money, there are threat actors, because most of the threat actors are actually uh, driven by financial desire for financial gain. So according to the 2024 crime report by the police, uh, it was reported that there was a 93.5% increase in cyber crimes, costing the economy roughly 72 billion Uganda shillings. Recent ransomware attacks in the banks and even SIM swap frauds these prove that the legacy enterprise security models are fundamentally they are failing in this mobile first distributed infrastructure, the modern infrastructure as we have it. Then we also look at the regulatory environment. The Bank of Uganda guidelines and the NPS Act. The NPS Act is the one that regulates, that actually deals with the mobile money environment. It's the one that established the mobile money environment. These ones demand security. They demand that customer data, that customers' finances be secured. But of course, there is no explicit architectural guidance on these security implementations. And in our case, that is zero trust. So when you go at our institutions, we face our banking institutions. Uh, they face varying digital maturity levels. They have very varying digital maturity levels. You look at, for example, developed banks. We have developed banks like Standard Chartered. At the same time, we also have tier two banks, like either Finca and all that. We do not expect them to be at the same maturity levels to be up to speed, because some of the banks are from outside the country, so they are funded, they're well funded, yet others are still struggling to catch up. So their resources are fewer. So that's why we need a customized approach to safely navigate these unique adoption barriers. Then we get to the statement of the problem, the problem of the research. So that the research is trying to deal with. Uganda's financial sector is being affected by sophisticated cyber threats that easily bypass all perimeter defenses. Uh, ZTNA is a proven tool. I've already stressed that, but adoption is way below the ideal. So the core problem is an absence of a context-aware risk assessment framework designed specifically for our region in Uganda. The consequence of this absence is that institutions are trapped. They either stick with inadequate legacy security architectures, or they attempt to force them ZTNA onto themselves blindly without systematically evaluating their readiness uh, or assessing compatibility risks. Blind adoption can lead to operational disruptions. It can lead to financial loss, and in terms of improperly used solutions, or even create more loopholes for the attacker because of poor adoption. So the general objective of the general objective of research is to develop a contextual risk assessment framework for zero trust network access adoption in Uganda's financial sector, systematically identifying, evaluating, and prioritizing adoption risks, enabling institutions to make informed evidence-based decisions aligned with capabilities, contexts, readiness, and the risk tolerance of these institutions. Then we get to the specific objectives. For the specific objectives, the research, basically to achieve our general objective, the research is broken into majorly four specific objectives. First, to identify and categorize the key risk factors across three three dimensions of the TOE, which is one of the frameworks we're relying on, as we will see later on in the conceptual. We're looking at the technological dimension, the environmental dimension, and the organizational dimension. Then second, to practically assess the likelihood and impact of these risks, and create a comprehensive baseline risk profile for the Ugandan financial sector. Then we proceed. The third one will be to develop the architectural framework that maps out these that systematically basically evaluates and prioritizes ZTNA adoption risks by mapping them out, providing structured methodologies for risk identification, uh, as risk assessment, and risk mitigation planning. The fourth will be to validate our framework that we've that have developed through expert evaluation and refinement, assessing the validity, practicality, and applicability to Uganda's financial institutions. Now we get to the general research question. So in this research, we're asking how can a context-aware risk assessment framework be developed? This is a general research question. How can a context-aware risk assessment framework be developed and validated to enable financial institutions in Uganda to systematically identify, evaluate, prioritize, and mitigate the technological, organizational, and environmental risks associated with ZTNA adoption? Now, for the specific research questions, these ones will mirror, of course, we are expected to mirror the specific objectives that I highlighted earlier on. We're asking, what are the key risk factors associated with ZTNA adoption across the TEO dimensions within Uganda's financial sector? What is the likelihood and potential impact of these identified risks? Then how can a context-aware risk assessment framework be developed to systematically evaluate and prioritize ZTNA adoption risks in Uganda's financial institutions? And the fourth would be, to what extent is the proposed framework valid, practical, and applicable to Uganda's financial sector as assessed through expert evaluation? Now, here we are looking at our conceptual framework diagram. The theoretical foundation, we are basing on four theories, if you may call them. We have the zero trust architecture, which is the first one. It's the one that is providing our security principles. They always verify. Do not trust, always verify. Basing on the do not trust, always verify norm. Here we're looking at principle of least privilege. We're looking at minimization of lateral movement. We're looking at things like two-factor authentication. When I say minimization of lateral movement, we're looking basically it breaks down to network segmentation. The network must be as much segmented as possible so that only the most cohesive resources are in the same network, so that most resources are distributed in the different segmentations, so that if someone attacks the network, they cannot easily move through the network and do whatever they want. They can only access what they were supposed to access. Anything else is out of reach. So then the other framework is the TOE framework. We've looked at it, looking at it's the one that will help us look at the contextual factors, technological, organizational, and environmental. Then the DOI theory, this is a diffusion of innovation theory. Here we are going to be looking at perceptions, user perceptions of these technologies. In this case, our interest is ZTNA. We're looking at users' opinions in terms of complexity, in terms of their understanding of the solution, in terms of even the risks. What are risks they think they are facing right now because of their current infrastructure, current environment, current skill levels, and all that. Then we'll be relying on ISO 31000. This one, it's what's going to help us with the risk management. This is a risk identification, assessment, and even mitigation planning. So then we have the framework, which will also be categorized in four. We have a contextual analysis, risk identification and categorization, risk assessment and prioritization. And then the last one will be risk treatment planning. The outputs, they are aligned according to the inputs. With contextual analysis, we'll get a comprehensive risk profile. With the identification and categorization, we'll get a prioritized risk list. Then the assessment and prioritization will give us a treatment plan, and the risk treatment planning will give us the final informed adoption decisions. So here are the independent variables, the contextual factors, the contextual factors. If I may move my mouse. Here, this is where the TOE factors, those are the independent variables. And the dependent variables will be the adoption decision that is given by the framework. It produces an adoption decision. You should adopt, go ahead if you are all is well, or first improve this, and then adopt, or adopt partially as you work on this, or don't adopt altogether because your system is just out of, it disagrees with even the basics of zero trust. So those adoption decisions are our dependent variables. So the description of the model is what I've been talking about already. We talked about contextual analysis, identification, risk assessment, and prioritization, and then the risk treatment planning. So with risk assessment and prioritization, maybe if I should highlight more about it, here is where we plotting the identified risk onto a risk matrix based on likelihood and impact. So we have different zones. We have zones where high risk, low risk, medium risk, and all that, as we'll see. Then we also have risk treatment planning. This one involves targeted mitigation strategies for high priority risks and proposes monitoring feedback loops for pre-adoption. This is a pre-adoption framework. So we're looking at before adopting so that the adoption happens well without any hindrances, without any risks, and um, so this is a template for the risk assessment matrix. We're looking at the likelihood vis-a-vis the impact of the risk factors. How likely is a risk factor? When you look at an institution that has no two-factor authentication, what is the risk factor? For example, a brute force attack, how likely is it? Then what would be the impact if it happened? So if for example, it is likely, it is categorized as likely, then the impact is that it is severe. Then that would be a high. It will be in the high zone. And that means it must be dealt with before implementation. We cannot try to work around or even wait about that. No implementation until it's worked on. So here I have the literature review. Globally, ZTNA, the ZTN, there's a NIST paper, the one that actually defines ZTNA, ZTA. It comprehensively captures architectural deployment, but its main focus is on the mature, resource-rich economies of the first world countries, as I earlier alluded. We have some local studies that highlight, for example, there's a paper by Mugume. It highlights severe cybersecurity maturity gaps here in Uganda, limited budgets, and e-risk vulnerabilities specific to the Ugandan financial services. So because of this, there is a gap that needs to be dealt with. There's need for a pre-adoption risk evaluation framework tailored for resource constrained environments like ours here. As of right now, there are also the other issue is that there's also no existing, there appears to be no existing framework, at least from the literature, combining TOE, DOI, and risk management, ISO 31000, to practically guide developing economies, financial institutions on whether and how to safely take on ZTNA. So we get to the methodology. This study will employ a mixed method design, such design, and it's structured in three sequential phases. The exploratory phase, this one is for data gathering, is to discover and contextualize the adoption risks, and it will happen mainly through purposive qualitative surveys. Then we have framework construction itself. Here we'll statistically assess risk likelihood and impact and populate the risk matrix. So we're looking at tools using Likert scales to have our clients. It's quantitative, mainly because of the Likert scales, because we'll be trying to quantify the risks that have been identified from the first phase. Looking at likelihood, which is rated from 1 to 5, and the impact also rated from 1 to 5. And we'll reach out to experts in the financial institutions, even the practitioners basically in the cybersecurity field in the financial institutions, to kind of give feedback on those risks, so that we can take them and then quantify with our tools, or actually do statistical assessment with the tools. Validation phase, this is the last phase. Having developed a framework, it will be, we'll have workshops or engagements basically with industry experts to look at this framework and assess as to whether it is practical or even suggest refinements until it actually is there. Population and sample selection. Cybersecurity professionals within, these are now, we're looking at a number of them, as you see, within commercial banks, microfinance institutions, and mobile money operators.
Try to wind up because the 15 minutes already ended. So you
Okay.
try to wind up.
Yes, thank you. So using interviews, surveys, validation, data collection, literature review. Some of the data will be picked from existing documents, the literature in already existent. Then interviews, as I said, and expert surveys using skills, analysis methods. We will look out for common themes, then do statistical analysis, and then construct a risk matrix. We'll use tools, Excel and Vivo and SPSS. Then, of course, the different numbers, because these are basically informed by existing literature on what is the proper number when you're doing these qualitative surveys. We saw 15 to 20 for thematic, for data saturation, basically. So then the key references that we have relied on for the research. Yeah, that is it. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. We'll start with feedback from Mr. Daniel. And as Mr. Daniel is guiding us and giving us feedback, the previous presenter who got issues, I don't know if you're back, Ayen.
Yes, I am back.
Okay, you'll be preparing yourself. I hope you have stabilized. Let's first get feedback for Rawlings. Mr. Daniel, are you there? Okay, as Mr. Daniel is coming back on the call, and we are going to start with you first scroll and we go on that slide for the problem statement. Okay. There's somewhere you were mentioning some statistics in the problem. First scroll the next slide and we see. There's some statistics you were mentioning, and my concern was I just wanted to find out if you have clear citation and the source